Welcome to episode number 20. I think we're 25. 26. Man, time flies when you're having a blast. Welcome to episode 26. Today we got a dear friend of mine, Mr. Michael Scarffe. We met back in CJEP at John Abbott.
We did, yeah.
We've kept in touch here and there. I always run into you, like every 6 months or something. Mm-hmm. And Mikey is a partner for a company called Sesh. So Sesh, I'm going to let you give the explanation of exactly what the product is. I'm Curtis Killen. This is the Freemium podcast, and welcome to the show today. Mike, for Mike or Mikey? I always call you Mikey.
Either way. I think a lot of my friends still go with Mikey, but
still go Mikey. Okay.
Business world, I'm trying to go with Mike.
Trying to make it Mike?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll call you Mike for today. So Mike, thank you very much for coming. The traffic I hear was, you were telling me was pretty bad.
Yeah, I got here though.
On Decarie, yeah.
It was worth it.
You did give the courtesy call to just let it be known that you were going to be a little bit late. And for those of you that are listening, I also have a nicotine gum in my mouth, and I'm getting lightheaded right now. So it's like, but you know what? According to Tucker Carlson and the Huberman Lab and other studies as well, nicotine can actually increase your focus. So here, before we get into all this, and I have a bunch of questions to ask you today, and I'm really looking forward to talking about this stuff. Tell us about Sesh products.
Yeah, first off, thanks for having me.
My pleasure.
We've been trying to do this for a while, so
yeah,
appreciate you
You're
making
a busy
the
man.
schedule. No. But yeah, so Sesh is really, it's a modern nicotine alternative company.
Yeah.
We started probably about 2 years ago. So it's already been a while that my business partner started the company.
Yeah.
And really the mission is to reduce tobacco-related harm to zero. Okay. So that was how the company started. We have a company based out of the US and also in Canada.
Yeah.
And
where in Canada?
So it's out of Vancouver.
Okay.
Yeah. And the US, it's Delaware.
Was there any particular reason that you opened in British Columbia? Is it easier to bring these types of products to market? Is that why, or it just happened to be in BC because he's from BC?
Honestly, that's it. He's from BC. It was his home. It just made the most sense to incorporate there.
Okay.
But we kept them separate because the way the products are marketed and regulated are very different in both countries.
Got it.
So by doing that, it kind of kept the businesses separate.
Got it.
And then how it started was really through my business partner, Max. He used chewing tobacco. He was a heavy vapor. And it was almost like the first thing when he woke up in the morning, he would reach for these products pretty much before he turned off his alarm clock. So it got to a point that he just wanted to change. So like a lot of Canadians, they go to the pharmacies, they pick up nicotine gum, they pick up the lozenge, and it's not to knock the products that are on the market because obviously it works for a lot of people. But for him, it wasn't like checking all the boxes, I would say. So he actually went to Europe, and that's where he got introduced to the nicotine pouch product. It's basically the same thing as a gum, but it's wrapped in a fleece instead of like a hard shell.
Yeah.
So very popular in Europe, and we don't have it here in Canada. So he's like, oh, this could be a great opportunity. We could introduce this to the Canadian market. At the time, they didn't really know how to regulate those products in Canada. Now it's not the case. Health Canada is very clear. If it's 4 milligrams or less, it's a natural health product. Above that, they classify it as a drug. So obviously a lot of hurdles to go through to get the approval process.
I'm sure.
So we're currently doing that, but that's why we decided to launch in the US. And then on the Canadian side, since there is a lot of nicotine gums on the market, it's been around for years. It's a bit of an easier way to get into market by kind of overseeing some of the challenges he had when he purchased the product.
And so just to make it clear for all of those out there, this is not a tobacco product. This is a nicotine product.
Correct.
And I used to smoke. I used to vape. I never really got into the chewing tobacco, but you could definitely still say that I'm addicted to nicotine. I know it's not good for you. And we were talking about this earlier. I want to make it clear for everyone else out there that we're not here. Like, if you don't smoke and you don't do nicotine, you said this, you're not suggesting, hey, try this product if you want to, get a little buzz. It's basically, exactly. So if I'm understanding correctly, this is for this is basically built to replace people who are either trying to quit smoking, who are trying to quit vaping, who are trying to stop chewing tobacco, excuse me, because the pouches exist for chewing tobacco as well. So that's kind of what you guys are trying to do. And I guess I don't want to say it's healthier, but it's not as bad to have, correct me if I'm wrong, it's not as bad to have just the nicotine if you're going to put it in your mouth as opposed to having the tobacco on top of that as well. Is that correct?
Yeah, so it's actually classified as a nicotine replacement therapy. That's how the product's classified with Health Canada. It's a cessation product. So
It's
really,
a what product?
cessation.
Cessation.
Yeah.
Okay, I've never heard that word before. But
Yeah. So it's to tell people quit smoking, and really what it is, it's everybody's different, right?
Yeah.
Like I know we were talking to someone today that they just told me that in the office that they quit cold turkey.
Yeah.
Which is amazing, but a lot of people it's hard to do that. It's a very addictive substance. So when you're smoking, I always think of it as you could reduce the ones that matter the least to you in the day. So for example, you could have a parent, the first morning coffee cigarette is extremely important to them.
Yeah.
Then they drop their kids off at school. They have another cigarette before work. They get to work, lunch break, they eat, they have another cigarette. At 10 a.m., they might have a cigarette break. Well, maybe try to replace that cigarette first, with a gum. And then gradually over time, you could replace more and more. And that's really how it's done, but it's only half the battle. The other half of the battle is obviously the behavior change. It's an addiction. So it's helping you cope with your nicotine cravings, but then you also have to make a change too and really want to quit.
And it's also like if you read the Nicorette instructions, I guess, the most important part that they say, they're like, look, this is nicotine. It's going to hopefully help you quit. But the most important part is still you need to have the will to want to quit. So if you're kind of like, oh, I don't really feel like quitting smoking, then there's no point in really going through this therapy. You might as well just keep smoking. It's most of the time for people that want to quit smoking, and more smokers than not, at least the ones I've spoken to, want to quit. Yeah. It's very rare you meet someone who smokes and it's like, do you want to quit? Like, nah.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah. But there's a lot of people that do like to quit smoking, and especially now for smoking and cigarettes, especially in Canada. I mean, the taxes are insane. To get a pack of cigarettes, I think now it's like $25 now or something to get a pack of cigarettes.
Yeah, it's been crazy. I think for the taxes, like the government obviously has their objective to reduce smoking incident rate in Canada under 5% by 2035.
What is it now?
Right now there's over 3 million smokers.
Really?
So it's
almost 10%.
Still quite heavy.
Yeah.
But it has been decreasing over years.
Yeah.
So they do have a lot of initiatives to help decrease if it's plain packaging, higher taxes. But the challenging part that I see is because it's so addictive, just because it's $25 a pack, it doesn't mean that someone can't or could just stop because of the financial commitment. They might look to illicit where they could find it on the black market. So I think it's helping like the future generations. But for the current generations that are smoking, I think these products are needed to help get them off it.
And it's interesting because it's kind of part of culture as well. Like you can go some places, for example, in Montreal, if you're out and about in Montreal, I find, I don't have actual data to back this up, but in my experience, there's a lot more people that are smokers in comparison to Toronto, for example. Like you can go outside a bar at, midnight in Montreal, everyone's going to be smoking around you. It's very easy to go find a cigarette. In Toronto, it could take you a while. You can look around and go, man, I feel like a cigarette. Most people don't really smoke. So I think it's kind of part of the culture as well. And I think in Europe, a lot more people smoke, especially in I know France, a lot of people smoke. I think Italy is pretty big on smoking. I think France is the big one though in Europe.
France is big. And you're right, even in Canada, based on provincial differences, like there is higher smoking incident rates in certain provinces versus others.
Which province is the highest?
Honestly, Quebec's pretty high.
Really?
It's up there. Okay. Versus BC, for example, that is lower. But if we look at Europe, Sweden, where the nicotine pouch product is probably one of the most mature markets with it, they have a smoking incident rate, I think it was last reported just above 6%.
Okay.
And this year, I think it was trending towards 5.6.
Okay.
Don't quote me on that because I don't think they have their final numbers out.
Yeah.
But in the rest of Europe, it's much higher. I think it's close to 18. And to
18%.
To your point, in France, they have come a long way. It has decreased a lot over the years. But when I last checked, I think it was about 1/3 of the people have reported to smoke a cigarette in the last year. So it doesn't mean they're daily users.
Yeah, but the
but
smoke.
it's definitely part of it. So if everybody could do what Sweden's doing, I think they're on the right track.
So what made you want to, what did you and your partner Max, it sounds like it's a very competitive industry. So you have Nicorette, they always have Nicorette has the products to help you quit smoking.
Yep.
The gum, they have the spray, they have the patch. I think the original one back in the day was the patch. I think that was the first. But there's a lot of competition in this space. So when you guys thought about starting the company, wasn't that one of your concerns at the beginning because it is such a competitive space? Like for example, are we allowed to bring up the name of a Zyn or something? They probably don't want to. So it's like we won't you know what, we won't mention that. But there are other competitors in the space for the pouch. So the gum is already very common. You can get it basically at any pharmacy. I get gum all the time, the Nicorette gum. And but the pouches, the nicotine pouches, you said are not here in Canada yet, but when you go to the US, so for example, I was just in New York City and I went to the store and I picked up some pouches of nicotine. I love it because as opposed to chewing tobacco where you have to spit it out, the nicotine, you can kind of just keep it in your mouth and get the buzz that you want to get. But back to the original question, why did you guys want to go into a space that is this competitive?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I've been in regulated industries for my whole career, right?
Yeah.
Right out of university. I do think there's a lot of barriers to entry to get into it. But I think there's a lot of opportunities. So I do think competition is healthy. Obviously, when you're going up against big tobacco or big pharma, they have huge budgets. They're extremely valuable to the retail partners. So I think it was to kind of differentiate with what we see in the market. So for Nicorette, you buy it mostly in a bulk if it's 3-5 packs that come inside a box with a blister pack. So we wanted to kind of change that. So that's why we developed a single pack that could be basically all the health information that they put on the box. We developed a flip tab and we put all the health information on a single pack packaging, which makes it a lot easier to also extend into different channels. And for a consumer, I think it's a nice advantage, right? Like a lot of people, like you said, use Nicorette. I don't often go out and see them put a blister pack of their nicotine gum on a table. But for us, they do. They're proud of the brand. Sesh is actually short for session. So we still wanted to take what people enjoy out of smoking because everybody knows it's not good for you.
Yeah.
But they continue to do it. So what do they actually enjoy, right? So that's how the brand name started. But I think it just starts the conversation. And I don't think people should be shy or kind of embarrassed about their quit journey. I think with our brand, that's what we want to do to stand out. And then obviously the flavors is something that we put a lot of effort into. We wanted something that tastes great. Not to say that the others don't, but we definitely wanted to innovate on flavors and all the changes in food science over the years. And on the US side, it's a very different ballgame. Like you said, there's nicotine pouches on the market.
Yeah.
What we noticed is there's still a limited number. There's not a ton of competition. But a lot of...
Sorry to interrupt. Are you guys selling the pouches in the US?
Correct.
You are. Okay,
Yeah.
Got it.
So a lot of the pouches in the US, we do think that the technology has evolved over the years as well. A lot of them you'll see they're more of a dry pouch.
Yep.
This was done for stability, to keep shelf life, also easy to scale. But we actually partnered with a company out of Sweden that was part of the building a lot of these brands to make our formulation. So it is patented. And we did differentiate. So we are a moist pouch, but we don't use water. So we use softeners. So we did get creative like that to kind of stand out from what's on the market versus what you see in Europe. Obviously, Europe is very mature market, a lot of innovation. I feel like we're still a little bit away from entering there, but it's definitely on our radar.
Is the end goal for you guys, and maybe you don't have an answer for this, but is the end goal to kind of just get bought out by Nicorette, for example? So let's say you come to market with a pouch. You already have the gum here in Canada. Let's just say the regulations go through. The regulators allow companies to start selling the pouches on the market. Is the end goal to sell to a company like Nicorette, or no, you guys want to be competing in this space? Or I guess it depends on what the offer is for them to buy you. There's a lot of
Yeah, there's a lot
variables.
of unknowns. I think right now what we're trying to do is build a viable business that's profitable that we could scale. I think a lot of people talk about, do you go public? Do you look to do a strategic partnership? I think in our eyes too, having a strategic partner could just really kind of put fuel to it, right? It will just,
especially with the brand. Like if they had a name behind it.
It would just really propel the brand to be able to scale and grow. It's not to say we're looking to get bought out tomorrow. I think it's something that, if the right partner comes along, we definitely entertain it, because we know what they could bring if this synergies within what they're doing.
Yeah. It's like, I'm just thinking right now, I mean, if I'm in this space, you gotta think that Nicorette is probably trying to, I don't know this, again, I'm not talking factual, but if I was them and Canada's on the brink of allowing nicotine pouches to be available in stores, if I'm Nicorette, I mean, I already have the brand name, I would be trying to get into this market, and I would probably be either trying to buy someone who already has the infrastructure and logistics set up to sell the product, and then smack on the brand of Nicorette. People are going to go, oh, Nicorette, the pouches, I'm going to go buy that. Like, that's what I would be thinking if I was Nicorette. Do you know if they're trying to do that? I would assume they are.
So Nicorette, I don't know if it's in their pipeline, to be honest. I do know other companies, just based on where they are elsewhere in the world, they're probably looking at Canada.
Yeah.
So I do think competition is going to be there. Whether or not we have enough market share or a brand that warrants that acquisition, I think it's to be seen. But I think healthy competition is good too, right? I think for nicotine gum, Nicorette really built that category.
Yeah.
And people are aware of it. And I think that also helps when we bring in our product. And then we could also really focus on where we see the gaps.
Yeah.
For example, a lot of people don't use nicotine gum correctly. They just chew it like normal gum.
Yeah. You're supposed to chew it a little bit, stop, put it at the top, then
Exactly.
chew it again. Yeah.
So, and I see it all the time. So that's where we really are putting a lot of our marketing dollars towards too, on the education behind it.
Got it.
So that people use these products properly. But if we were the first mover, like a Nicorette, it would be different in terms of kind of like the messaging, where it falls in.
How are you balancing right now? Because you're running a business and it's a startup. 2 years old, you said?
About 2 years.
So that's definitely a startup. How are you balancing right now profitability and growth? Or maybe you're not worried about profitability at all right now because you're just focused on growth. But how are you, like, what is your mindset right now? Are you trying to just basically grow? You have financing behind you and you don't really care about profitability. You're just thinking about market share right now? Or are you trying to balance both of them at the same time?
Yeah, I think they go hand in hand a bit. I think it's not something you disconnect completely. It depends a bit on your investors. So for us, it's not like we had a strategic investor that took 20%, that has like a cash cow that generates a ton of profit and they just want to scale and have the resources behind it. So we do have to be conscious about profit. The way I look at it is, you don't have to necessarily go so big that you can't support it. So for us, it was this like major cities, like if it's Toronto, Vancouver, like there's a lot of major cities that if you concentrate your marketing dollars and really focus, you understand and prove a model. So if you could show, look, there's reorders, people are coming back, they're buying these products. We know what to invest in terms of marketing and what to avoid because we tried it. Then you could go to an investor and say, look, here's a proven model that we just need more capital and we could replicate this in other provinces, other states. We
can scale this, yeah.
Then I think it's a lot easier to get investors to be bought in. But if you're trying to do everything at once right away, you might kind of stretch yourself too thin. I know there's a saying that's like spray and pray, where you kind of try to get distribution everywhere and then it solves a short-term problem, but you might not necessarily get it to go off the shelf.
Would you say it's easier than you thought or more difficult than you thought it was going to be to get funding, to get investors to buy into the company, whether it's through a loan, taking an extra equity stake? Do you want to talk about the details of what's going on right now? Like, do you have other shareholders outside of yourself and Max? Is it just loans? Is it bank loans? Is it, I think the BDC, sometimes they give startups loans, stuff like that, high interest loans. Like if you're comfortable speaking about it, what's going on right now with Sesh?
Yeah, for sure. So Max really is the one that went out there and did the fundraising. I think he's very good at it, and he has a big network.
He can schmooze.
Yeah. Well, I think honestly, it's just because he's so passionate about
it.
It really projects the vision. I think in today's environment, it's a lot harder than 2 years ago to do the fundraising.
Yes.
But I do think money's still available, right? They're just being more selective who they invest into. So I think in terms of getting investors to come on board, there is definitely more due diligence. We're at a valuation that would be a bit higher than we would have been, again, 2 years ago. So just having all your financing and books in order. And then the other thing that I think helped with investors was having milestones and being kind of set on achieving that. Because if you achieve those milestones, the investors know that their equity position is going to be worth more because you hit those milestones. So I think.
And what's an example of a milestone that you guys had?
One example is the patent transfer. So basically, our partners in Sweden, they actually own the patent ahead of time. It's not something that you could just whip up and get approved right away. So to be able to do that was a huge milestone because that's an asset that has value, which beforehand it was something we were working towards.
Got it.
Sales, distribution, those are all milestones that we have for our investors. And then to your point, like the BDC grants, there's other funding out there to help small businesses.
Products like this. And is the product manufactured in North America? Is it manufactured in Sweden? Like where is it built or made?
So the gum is made in the US.
It's made in the US.
And the pouch currently is made in Sweden.
Okay.
But we're working to expand that just because we quickly hit capacity.
Okay.
So we're looking for new partners in North America to help us expand, and then also logistically, it makes a lot more sense to be able to produce locally than air freight everything over from Sweden.
Yeah. Is that what what your competitors do? Like, do you know anything? Can you speak to their logistics? Like, do you know for a fact? Like, I'll give you an example. If I didn't know this, but when I used to work in the bars, Guinness. So Guinness, for example, a lot of times is it's people think it's all manufactured. It's brewed in Dublin, Ireland, which they do have a brewery in Dublin, Ireland, but not all of it is brewed there. A lot of it's actually brewed locally. I don't know where it's brewed in North America, but I know it's not brewed in Ireland and shipped all the way over here. They make it here. So they basically just take the recipe, how to make it, and they start doing it over here. Do you know if your competitors for the pouches are doing that, or?
Yeah, so there's a lot of pouches in the US that are being produced in the US. Like I said, just being able to produce locally, there's a lot of cost savings. Yeah. But also the FDA has certain requirements that not everybody producing in the EU is also set up to be able to meet. So to find facilities that are already FDA approved and fully GMP, yes, there are in Europe, but there's also quite a bit in North America.
How many employees do you guys know?
So it's increasing every day. I think we're about 7 right now that would be full-time payroll.
Nice.
And then we have a ton of contractors and advisors that we work closely with. So that was part of the kind of decisions as you scale the business. It's, when does it warrant a full-time position? And when can we contract that out? Because we know, periods of the year it's going to be very heavy in regulatory.
Yeah.
But then other periods of the year, it might be a bit slower. So bringing that person on full-time in-house would be very costly. So we are working a lot with contractors and third parties right now too.
What's it like bringing a nicotine product like this to market, considering all the red tape that you have to go through? Is it, I work in a very regulated industry as well, insurance. So we have a lot of regulatory bodies that we have to speak to on a regular basis, and rules we have to abide by. It's just very, very, very regulated. I'm not saying we don't need regulation. There does need to be regulation to a point. I think we're over-regulated. I think a lot of industries in Canada are over-regulated, which basically hurts Canada in the long run for competition, because other countries don't have to deal with that type of regulation. They can bring products to market quicker. They can innovate faster. So I think countries need to kind of find the balance. I can give a million examples, and I think a lot of people will agree. In Canada is over-regulated. We love oligopolies, and what ends up happening in these highly regulated spaces is it just creates oligopolies. So we have an oligopoly in banking, we have an oligopoly in telecom, we have an oligopoly in food, like for all the grocery chains, and I can go on and on and on. And it's not good for competition. It's not good for the consumer either. So in Canada, like, how have you ever kind of sat there and just gone like, I can't get this product to market. Like, I literally can't, I don't know what to do anymore. Like, what do I have to do to do this? Like, has that ever crossed your mind sometimes? Because like there must be that small little chance that if for whatever reason this person wakes up on the wrong side of the bed, they're like, you know what, I'm not this product. I don't want it coming to Canada. Like, is that a possibility?
Well, I think with regulations, like you said, they're very important, right? Like, I think being able to get a product like this approved, you have to show like the safety and efficacy. You have to have studies behind it. And then also you have certain marketing principles that you want to adhere to from a company standpoint, but also from the regulatory. So in that essence, I think it makes a ton of sense. I think it is challenging for a lot of people to start up a company in that industry, right? It takes a lot of funding. It takes a lot of time.
Yeah, it's very expensive. Because it's like, it must be very, very expensive to go through the hoops of the red tape environment that we have here in Canada. And I'm sure it's the same in other countries, but
I agree. And I think Canada, though, for the nicotine pouch, I think they got it right. I think, like I was talking about earlier, when they considered,
if you're listening to this, the regulators in Canada, he's saying you guys got it right. So
for how they determine how it should be classified.
Okay, fair enough.
So for the nicotine pouch, if it's 4 milligrams or less, then it's a natural health product, which, it's accessible. They actually endorse it. They want it to be visible. They want people to know about these products as better alternatives. If it's over 4 milligrams, then it's classified a drug, behind the counter, a little harder to get. So in that essence, absolutely, I think it's classified correctly. In the US, that's where it was a bit more difficult, I would say, in understanding where this product should be positioned. So when we launched, it was really kind of in that gray zone. It was synthetic nicotine. It has no tobacco in it, so it's not a tobacco product. They're arguing there's not enough studies to make it a cessation product. So basically in the US, there's 3 classifications. It's tobacco product, where you need to submit a PMTA. Then there's a modified risk tobacco product, and then there's NRT. So there's kind of 3 steps, and the FDA took the conservative approach where it's like, we already have marketing restrictions in place for tobacco. Let's make sure that, this doesn't end up in the wrong hands, which I agree with. But because of that, there's multiple steps to take before it's considered that NRT. Versus Canada, it's going to come out as an NRT product right away.
So is the race, is like the big goal here to kind of just be the first to start distributing nicotine pouches in Canada? I guess that would be like, is that goal number 1 for Sesh?
Yeah, I think that's the goal of our company and probably many others. I think first to market, obviously.
It's kind of like the same thing. Sorry to interrupt you there. It's kind of like the same thing as crypto, right? So crypto, they kept trying to, for those of you that follow the financial news, crypto right now, there's not a lot of regulation around it. And so, for example, Coinbase was, I'm not an expert, but I think they were like a crypto exchange or something like that. And the SEC, the regulatory body for stocks, more or less, for the markets, threw the book at them. It's clear they don't want Coinbase around. And then the past week, the news that's coming out, you have companies, banks like BlackRock and other banks that are starting their own cryptocurrency or Bitcoin ETF. So it's kind of like, okay, you guys say you don't want to have crypto around, but that's not the case. You want to have crypto around, but through institutions that you can control better. And so like I feel like that would kind of be the same thing here, and governments are much more likely to, again, this is an assumption, I just feel like they would be much more likely to go to a company like Nicorette, which they know, I'm sure Nicorette gives, money to the right people, they pay the right, I'm not saying like briefcases, but they make donations to the right foundations and stuff like that. I'm sure all that's going on. So like that must be a big concern of yours, kind of like, how do I say this? I'm kind of just saying you're kind of like, your fate is in the hands of someone else for this type of product. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think like also like if another product gets approved, like, and you show bioequivalence, it's hard to kind of deny it.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons it's taken so long is they also want to make sure these products are marketed properly and in the right hands. They don't want something that's in the market and then, for the wrong reasons. So that's where like your Nicorette of the world. And for us, since we are a smaller company, I think we just have to build that kind of reputation, right? Like when I was talking about our mission, reducing tobacco related harm to zero, we have to now like prove that that's our goal and show all of our marketing efforts and really be kind of like aligned to the vision. And then I think we'll get more of a reputation with Health Canada that they kind of get behind as well. But I don't think they're selecting companies based on who they are or their kind of like track record in the past. I think they're selecting companies also on the studies and the formula of the product.
So you have trust in the process, basically the regulators. You're trusting that they're gonna regulate this honestly, and they're not going to give it to somebody who sends them a vacation package for their family. Yeah, I'm always skeptical about this stuff, just because, and it's no knock on you, and I'm not trying to knock the regulators or anything like that, but it's like you hear things like FTX scandal again. I'll just go back to crypto. Like you find out after, so number one, it was illegal what he was doing, and you find out he was greasing both sides. He was greasing the Democrats and the Republicans, and it never came in cash in a briefcase. But he was donating to all the right the fundraisers and stuff like that, and he was just basically, he was through the back door buying off the policymakers to basically make legislation that was going to be more favorable to his company, not crypto in general, his particular company. And I always I don't know. I've seen so many times like these stories come out after, and the regulators are a lot of times, maybe it's not as greasy here in Canada, but they're bought off. Yeah. You know what I mean? And it's just like, I kind of like, does that, when you're trying to raise money, are these questions that potential investors or current investors, do they ask these types of questions?
Like, honestly, we don't get asked that in regards to Health Canada. I think like they're all people, right? They have a pretty heavy workload. They're trying to get these products approved, and they want to do it the right way, because once it's their name behind it too. Yes. So I think that's extremely important to them, and I think it's just a matter of time right now to get it through.
Got it. So it sounds like you have confidence that everything's going to be okay. And
don't get me wrong. I get frustrated myself on the process.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah.
I know it's very similar to a gum. It's been on the market for ages. So I think there is certain parts in the process that are obviously frustrated just because we want it on the market. But we also understand that these are in place for a certain reason, and it's not something that is just blocking us. If you're launching, I would say another 5-hour energy, you got to go through a similar process to get a natural health product. Obviously not as much studies. They have different kind of levels of their review process. But it's kind of, to get that designation as a natural health product, there is steps to take. Yeah.
I remember when I was trying to get so we're in Quebec and Ontario, and I remember trying to get our license to go into an Ontario, and this is probably nothing. It took us 8 months. For 8 months, you'd be like, damn, 8 months, that's amazing. That's not long at all. But I remember being frustrated, and I was just frustrated with they're great now, so don't get me wrong. The regulatory bodies in Ontario, don't shoot me because I speak them sometimes. But the process itself, for me, I found was too long. It was 8 months, and the information that they asked for, I got it to them immediately. The whole thing took about 8 months.
Yeah.
And again, I'll just go back to the same point. It hurts competition, and it's long run. I don't think it's overkill. You know what I mean? But again, that's.
And I do think with these products, it will change a bit over time when the bar is set. It did feel like a bit of a moving goalpost over time.
Yeah.
But to your example with crypto, like when it first came out, there was a ton of people skeptical about it. And then more and more people started to understand what it is, get involved, and it's very accepted today, right? So probably not where it needs to be or fully, but versus where it was 5 years ago, it's a big difference. And I think with emerging categories, it's always going to be the case.
I wonder what's going to happen for crypto in the future.
I don't know. I still got some Ethereum, so fingers crossed.
It's just like I always give the example. It's kind of off topic. We're not talking about Sesh, but hey, it's a podcast. We can talk about whatever we want to talk about. There's like this. I always give the example, and again, maybe I'm wrong. No one knows for sure where Bitcoin's gonna go. I think Bitcoin is here to stay. Again, maybe I'm wrong. I listen to Michael Saylor a lot, like the godfather of Bitcoin. He's so smart, that guy. But I listen to a lot of his podcasts and when he talks, and he makes a lot of great points. And there's this. So back in the day, during the when Britain was the ruler of the world, we'll call it, when they were like the powerful empire, so before the US, and so they had the British pound, and then gold was coming up as a competing currency, and they basically said, if we catch you exchanging goods or services in gold, we're going to kill you. So I kind of find like the same thing is happening, not to that extent, but China, for example, they banned Bitcoin or all cryptocurrency. The US, a month ago, it looked like they were going to completely ban all cryptocurrency, but now they're letting, the big banks and the hedge funds who have a lot of power and a lot of influence, they're letting them all of a sudden change it. So I don't know what their game plan is, but it's just, crypto is, it's always interesting to see what's going to happen with these things because no one knows for sure.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, that's interesting. With regards to running the business. So we've talked enough about regulation, I think, for now. And at the end of the day, it is like, look, I'm sure you guys it's ultimately out of your control. You can do everything they ask you to do. I'm sure they're asking you to modify the product from time to time. They're saying you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to prove this, you need to prove that to make sure in order to bring the product to market. But at the end of the day, it's not up to you. It's up to a board or people, the decision makers, to do that. So when it comes to the actual stuff that's within your control, so running the business itself, what has worked really well for you guys and what has not?
Yeah, I think from business, it does kind of touch on a bit of the regulatory too. It's really surrounding yourself by the right people, right? Like Max and I, we're not PhDs, we're not experts in a lot of the regulatory process, but we do our homework and we learn, but we also surround ourselves by great people. That could be through our hires, contractors, and then also through our full-time employees. So I think that's really been a huge help.
So the consultants are, I'm assuming they're probably helping you with the regulation?
Exactly.
So did they used to work on that side of the fence?
So one of the people that we have that's been instrumental, he used to work for Health Canada.
Got it. Okay, so he's helping you a lot.
He understands, and he's just been really helped us, guide us through that process. And on the US, we have a whole army. I think we have like FDA lawyers. We have another agency that really has a lot of experience in PMTAs. So we definitely wanted to surround ourselves.
What's a PMTA?
That's the first step before NRT or MRT and NRT. So it's pre-market tobacco authorization or application.
Cool. Yeah.
So really been helpful setting that up. And then it's the same even in day-to-day sales, right? Like if you have good people behind you, it goes a long way. Obviously, we can't hire a huge corporation at this stage, but just having people with experience that could act as an advisor, again, gives us a lot of knowledge and insights on how to grow the business. I think the other thing that's been really good for the success is how we kind of developed our partnerships with our retail partners.
Okay.
Again, through experience working with Convenience Channel, we kind of understand what their margin expectations is, which I think is always the first step. But what they're really interested in is like, how are you going to help grow sales in our stores? How are you going to direct traffic? So just being able to have an understanding of that and implement it and show the partners allowed us to grow distribution. In terms of some of the challenges, we talked about regulatory to death, so I won't go down that route. But I think at the beginning, supply chain, I think like most people with COVID, exiting COVID, a lot of disruption in supply chain.
Yes.
So to be able to set up new lines to meet capacity has all been big process that we're happy that we did it beforehand before we fully ramp up and scale. And
for the manufacturing process, because I've interviewed or had a podcast with a couple other people. So for example, I had Dave Rose from Smoke Show. So a lot of times companies, they don't, if it's not worth it yet, they'll rent out a space, for example, to make the sauce. So are you guys, I'm assuming you probably rent out the space to manufacture the product, or do you own all the equipment as well?
No, exactly. So we partnered with like contract manufacturers.
Got it.
That have their site license, the drug establishment license, these sort of things that we need, that we know is going to be years and years and very heavy capital investments. So we did partner with the right people, but we do own part of the process. So like the procurement of ingredients we're involved with. We don't want it to rely solely on them. And at the end of the day, if they could focus on the co-packing and not the other parts of it, it allows us to scale more rapidly.
Interesting. Very interesting. And you said, so sorry, I'm repeating myself, the manufacturing, some of it's manufactured in Sweden and some of it manufactured in Delaware?
No, so it's in New York, in the US. Okay. And then we're bringing on more manufacturing for the pouch in North America.
Have you ever had instances where you were supposed to get a product at this particular date and it was late for whatever reason? Or like, I feel like that's kind of when it's ultimately outside of your control, like it's not in your hands, you're not controlling the manufacturing process. Again, I'll just speak to when I had Dave Rose on here, and he said, he goes, the people he works with are excellent. He loves working with them, but he goes, yeah, for sure. There are instances where I need X amount of bottles of sauce and I don't get my X amount of bottles of sauce on this particular date. And I promised this client over here he was going to get it. And now I can't give it to him. And now I'm all stressed.
No, absolutely. I think transparency is always key there.
Yeah.
I think we were very aware of what our capacity was for the nicotine pouch. The beauty of working with some of these bigger contract manufacturing companies is, they have their production schedule. It's very tight. And as long as you have your ingredients in time, you're locked in. We did run into obstacles at the beginning as we scaled, but we also kind of planned for it. So when we brought on new accounts, as soon as a new account on, we wanted to make sure that we're not going to be short shipping these guys. We have to make sure we could fulfill all their reorders, even if it sacrifices not bringing on another account. So we did do a bit of a juggling act. We understand where the bottleneck was in production, and we invested to fix it. So really hopeful that we don't run into it. I know a lot of people say like, oh, if we're selling X million cans, it's a good problem. It's a good problem in terms of like you're selling a lot, but you could destroy your brand pretty quickly too. So like
if the retailers, like if you never bring the product on time for them, they'll probably be like, hey, you guys can't get your shit together, so we don't want to.
You don't have many chances with these guys. Yeah. So definitely it's a priority for us, and it's a big part of my job.
Would you consider the industry that you work in controversial?
I think if we go back to the Bitcoin example, right? Like when it was very early.
Is this a Bitcoin podcast?
No, I just think I like to go with it.
Yeah.
Like early on, people didn't understand it.
Yeah.
And then as it grew, more and more people accepted it. I think for us, if I was sitting here working for Johnson & Johnson, selling Nicorette, I don't know if you'd be asking me that same question. And I also wondered like why we get asked. And I think it is because we're a very early company. And people want to make sure that we're true to our mission in eliminating tobacco related harm, and that we could do that in terms of our marketing as well. So just in terms of being super responsible, for us when we launched our flavors, yes, we wanted great tasting, but we launched a mature palate as well. So we're not launching a bubblegum flavor the next day. In convenience stores, it's positioned by the clerk so they can monitor it.
Okay.
We do age verification that. Not even really industry standard. So I think the more
I saw that on your website. I went on your website. The first thing pops up, what's your age? And I was like, oh, cool. I'll put my age in.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we're taking the precautions to make sure that, when people understand what we're doing, they're going to understand we're doing it for the good and the benefit of public health, versus kind of like the people that scrutinize it. And then the other point, I think it's the common misconception around nicotine, right? Like I think people think nicotine cancer, But really, nicotine's not known to cause cancer or the pulmonary vascular diseases. It's acts as a stimulant. It's highly addictive. So if you don't use it, don't start. But it's not really linked.
Did you hear that, people? If you don't use it, so Mike, he's making this very clear. If you don't use nicotine products, he's not suggesting to start. We'll make that clear.
Exactly. So like, just because it's so addictive, and then obviously, like you said, the higher blood pressure. If you have cardiac disease, don't use it, but also don't smoke. You probably have bigger problems right now.
But that's for nicotine though. It's more of it's like bad for your heart, I think, right?
Well,
it's more of a heart thing.
It raises blood pressure.
Okay.
So if you use it too much, so that like caffeine, similar.
Sometimes I wonder, because I have like 5-6 cups of coffee a day, and I'm still addicted to nicotine. I take quite a bit of nicotine, and I'm like, damn, man, am I gonna have a heart attack one day?
Yeah, but I think that's kind of where people bring in that question. But I think that's gonna change over time. That's what I'm hopeful, and I think it's on us to prove them otherwise.
What do you do at Sesh? What's Mikey Scarffe's role at Sesh?
So, as you know, like a startup, you're kind of intertwined a bit in everything. We definitely try to divide it a lot. I do focus a lot on the operations, so that's why when you talked about the manufacturing and kind of the regulatory, this is all something that I focus a lot on. But we touch all aspects. So I'm still involved in sales calls. Okay. Still involved in the marketing side, but as we grow, we definitely want to have clearer roles and responsibilities. Somebody told me once, like, the more involved you are in your company, the less your company's worth. Yep. And I can't agree more, right? So it's like you need to have a kind of like a well-oiled machine that runs without you. So that's the place we want to get to, so we could continue to focus on growing it where we're not currently in markets. So that's the goal.
It also adds more value to the company, because if there's a prospective buyer to come and buy a company and they know that, like, for example, if you are the company and then you leave, they're kind of screwed too. So It also speaks to a good leader, and a good leader is someone who can leave a company and the company can still run itself. That usually speaks to what's the guy's name? Jack Welch, but he's him at General Electric. So he was a very popular and controversial CEO. So back in the day when I think he died recently, but maybe he's still alive, I'm not sure. But he was notorious for firing the bottom. It was 5 or 10% least productive of his workforce, which was controversial. And I'm not saying I agree or disagree with that, but once he left, GE today is a shell of what it used to be. And he admitted himself relatively recently, he's like, I didn't do that good of a job in grooming the next leader, because as soon as he left, the company kind of went to shit. Yeah. And it's been going to shit. So that's another interesting point too. So how are you guys, I know you just mentioned that you're more on the logistics side. How are you making most of your sales? How are you generating the revenue? Is it mostly online sales, direct to consumer? Is it more through retailers? Is it more to wholesalers? How are you guys generating your revenue for Sesh products?
So I would say it's pretty much entirely right now on B2B. Okay. So big focus for us was to get partnerships with some bigger banners. So for example, Circle K in Ontario, Shell National, Jean Coutu in Quebec. So Quebec, this product is still only pharmacies. So Jean Coutu is a big partner of us, and we have many others. For the gum. Yeah. So that's still a major part of our revenue driver, and our marketing efforts go into supporting that. So if it's like digital ads that like explain where it's available, our store locator on our website is over 70% of our traffic. So a lot of people are going on to understand where to purchase these products.
Here's a good question I got from you. I always take these questions. It's funny enough. I go on ChatGPT. I type in, I go, this person's coming out to the podcast. This is the product that they sell. It started this. Like I prompt it. I put as much information as I can. And then ChatGPT gives me a bunch of questions and stuff. And
that's how I get my answers. So
yeah, yeah. People are always like, man, you ask really good questions. I'm like, most of them are from ChatGPT. But here, so ChatGPT, thanks. This is actually a really good question. So like as a partner in a company like this, in a startup, what would you say has been the biggest significant learning experience that you've gone through? And that could be either learning the regulatory hurdles you have to go through. That could be learning how to actually run a business. Because correct me if I'm wrong, this is the first time you've ever been a leader in a business, right? This is the first time you've ever owned a business.
Yeah.
So what are some of the big learning experiences that you've had being a business owner?
Yeah, I think it's obviously the regulatory, we need to learn a lot, but there's also like how you address situations. Like you said earlier, there's a lot of things outside of your control. So a lot of people could get stressed and not know what to do. I think if you kind of funnel that energy to find solutions, it could also create opportunities.
Yes.
Where other people, they can't really continue with the times. Another big learning, I think it's a lot of people go into entrepreneurship because they don't want to have a boss for this and that. Like I've always had great relationships with my bosses in the past. So I didn't think that was kind of like a driver. But one thing that I think a lot of people also realize is no one's going to tell you what to do. So you got to really think of all aspects of the business, even if that's not where you're experienced, right? Like accounting is not something that I studied. A lot of my time is in finance and accounting and making sure our cash flow and everything is lining up. So I think it's just to make sure that you're a quick learner and could kind of go into these departments that you didn't necessarily think you would, and know that no one's going to do it for you. And then I guess the last learning is definitely to delegate it and kind of like empower your employees. I think just before you kind of like, some people are very task driven. Here's a list, do this.
Yes.
But if you want them to own it and take responsibility of what they're doing, it makes it better for them. But also as an organization, they're going to think of stuff that you didn't think about. So
do you like running a business?
I love it. I think, definitely. I think it's.
What do you love about it?
Honestly, there's a lot of ups and downs.
Yeah.
It's constant roller coaster, but I think it's just so much more rewarding to be able, when you hit your milestones. Obviously, I have a business partner in Max who's complements very well on a business aspect, but also is one of my best friends, right? So I think that's always a big plus, because to do this alone, I don't think I could. I definitely value having a business partner that you
can bounce ideas off of.
We work
kind of, and you feel like you're actually in it together, because it can be stressful. Do you ever have to fire someone?
I have in the past. I think so far, knock on wood, no one at Sesh. But I think we're also very selective in who we hire, and really want to make sure that they're on board with the vision, what we're doing, and kind of understand that startup life, right? Like I think you could get some people that are very qualified for certain positions, but do they embrace kind of like that startup vibe? It's not everybody. It takes a special character.
Yeah, it's a lot of like shooting from the hip, and there's not nearly as much structure in comparison to like a bigger company. Like I would say that all the time when I was having interviews. We're 35 employees. We're by no means a big company, but at the same time, we're a lot more structured than we were, for example, 5 years ago. But when I learned, when I was learning at the beginning, because I made a few hires, and sometimes people would come in and go like, I can't work here. This isn't structured enough. And because at the end, whenever someone would leave, I would always have, or I would attempt to have as much as possible, a brutally honest conversation with them. I'd always say, okay, what did you like? What did you not like? Because, they're already going. So it's like, I want to learn to try and make it better for the company that I'm running. And I would always ask that. And there was a couple times where they're like, I can't, like, this isn't for me. There's not enough structure. And I was like, hey, I probably need to get more structure. So but you're absolutely right. When you're hiring these people at the beginning, are you crystal clear to them? Like, hey, I just want to make it be known to you that this is a startup. There are going to be many instances where you're going to have a question for me, and I'm probably not going to have the answer. And you're not only going to be doing this task, there's going to be many other tasks. You're going to be wearing multiple hats. Have you gotten better at kind of expressing that to potential employees when they're coming to work at your office? Because it is. It's like startups are. It can get very messy.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think it's something we bring up to make sure people are comfortable with that environment. As we mature, similar to you, I think you want to have more structure in place.
Yeah, you need it.
And the people that could survive kind of like that startup, but in their mind, that's how they're driven.
Yeah.
I think it's actually a benefit because they could help us build these processes. Like I know I used to drive some people that used to work with nuts. Like I would have papers and pen and paper on everything and kind of everything in my head. And it's not really sustainable for growth. So having those people that are structured, I think is great. But there's kind of like that time and place where it's like you mature into that.
Yeah.
But right now we're not at that stage where we could just have someone focus on one specific task. They are going to take a bit of everything.
Yeah, not yet. What's the like the 5-year plan for Sesh? Like, are you trying to have? Obviously, you want more outside of the obvious stuff. So obviously, you want to have more sales. You want to have more products come to market. Like that goes without saying. I'm talking about with regards to the operation itself. So is your goal to eventually have, for example, the core employees, they would get equity in the business? Is it to have the logistics network all set up in terms of manufacturing the product and stuff like that? Like what's your 5-year plan for Sesh?
Yeah, I think a lot's going to happen in 1 month, in 1 year, in 5 years. I think having an ESOP in place is extremely important. Obviously we can't.
For those that don't know, it's an employee share option program, an ESOP.
Thanks for that.
No problem.
I like a lot of these people that have joined us.
Yeah.
It's because they believe in what we're doing, but we're not necessarily able to pay the same salaries as some of the major companies in the space. So I do think that adds value, and it also, they want the best for the company because they have an equity stake in it. So that's,
you have one set up?
That we do.
Oh, you do? Great. Yeah. Good for you.
So that's something that we want it to be very clear right from the get-go, so everybody knows kind of where they stand. And then in terms of like 5 years, yes, like you said, is revenue, sales projections. I do think there's a lot of innovation in products. So that kind of stays within the obvious, but I do think that we could adapt our product to kind of be better or to have different dosage forms. But I also find that the global opportunity is there. So right now, like I was saying, like we want to have a proven model, scale out, kind of like Canada, US main focus. But we've been in discussions with people in Europe. We've been in discussions with people in Asia. Europe, obviously, very mature market. Asia, I would still say, is on its infancy stage. So I do think there's a lot of opportunities to grow the brand outside of North America. And then within 5 years, I do think when we do our round of investments, we will like to bring on a strategic partner. So someone that could really help us scale and grow if it works in with synergies of what they're doing. I think that will be pretty important too for our company.
I'm going to ask you a hypothetical question.
Sure.
It just popped into my head. This is a product to help get you off smoking.
Yeah.
5 years from now, Imperial Tobacco, example.
Yeah.
Comes up to you, guys, we love your product. We love the brand. You built a hell of a business here. We want to partner with you guys. We want to give you a bunch of cash and help you distribute the product. But Imperial Tobacco, they sell cigarettes. So now a lot of people would see that as, well, you started off as like a quit smoking product. They would see that as potentially a conflict of interest.
Yeah, I think it depends. Like,
would you do it?
It depends on what they're doing as a company, right? Like I know that they've also made a lot of shifts in kind of like their future plans.
Yeah.
They've invested into energy drinks. They've invested into kind of the modern oral products. So they are shifting. I think the difference there is because cigarettes drive so much profit. It's hard to just kind of ignore that and put it to the door.
So it helps finance a lot of their other projects and stuff.
It does. But I also know because of that, there could be a lot of confusion of what's happening inside the organization. So for me, if in the company in 5 years, where they are going to be in 5 years too could be a much different story where they are today. Like I know with Philip Morris, they talked about their smoke-free future. They invested heavily. They said, I forget what it was, but by a certain year, they're not going to be selling cigarettes anymore. So
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So it's going to change in 5-10 years as well. That people might look at it very differently. From our standpoint, what's very important is what we're trying to achieve with our mission. And then by then we should have good market share. People know and trust it, that it's not really the company that's behind it. It's as long as you're staying true to what you're trying to achieve. I think anybody could be a partner.
What maybe you don't know the answer to this, but like whatever happened to Juul? Do you know the Juul story?
I know the Juul story, yeah. So
Are they, can you tell us the Juul story? Like, are they still around? Because Juul to me, like 3-4 years ago or 5 years ago, whenever it was kind of popular, everyone was juuling. It was basically vaping, right? Yeah. Everyone had it. And then I feel like the regulators just went after them. And I don't know if the company's still around, but they really threw all the books at them. Juuls, I don't even think you can get a Juul in Canada anymore. Correct me if I'm wrong. But, and there's all these other vaping products and stuff. So in my head, I'm just going like, why did they throw the book at these guys?
Yeah.
And yet you could still purchase all of these vape products. Why did you pick on Juul? What did they do wrong?
Yeah, I think with Juul, like I said, it's a little hard for me to fully talk to it because I wasn't part of the company and as involved in kind of their story. I think they grew very quickly.
Yeah.
It was kind of like they were the leader in the industry.
Yeah.
And
they're not anymore, right? Do they exist still, or?
So they pulled out of Canada. They're still in a few stores. So it's not like they don't have any presence. But they did a huge restructure, and part of that was to eliminate a lot of the Canadian roles. In the US, I think when you have that growth so quickly, it's hard to control as an organization. So there was probably some things that were a bit out of their control as well. I know that there was that huge youth crisis where there was a lot of people that never smoked before.
Yeah.
People that were younger that would adopt this new technology, and I think that created a lot of scrutiny, obviously. And then I think that's what put them really on the radar with the FDA. I think afterwards they did develop a lot of processes to avoid youth uptake. They were probably one of the first to implement a lot of these. They also did a lot of scientific research to really show that the benefits that they would argue on the products. So I think it was just hard to get out of that hole once you're kind of on the radar, because the FDA probably has a lot of pressure too. What are you doing about Juul, right? So I think it was a bit of a mess. I don't really think, again, this is for me looking from the outside in, like the intentions were all wrong. But I just think it became such a animal that it was hard to kind of rewind. And also I think it kind of paved the way for the industry to really look at these products and make sure that everybody is doing the right thing to avoid youth uptake, to make sure that, if you're not using it, don't use it. So there's definitely a lot of learnings. It's just sad that there's obviously a massive company that failed and had to be kind of the example.
All right. So did they completely fail?
So
like they were publicly traded, or they are publicly traded, I think, right?
Yeah, they got a big investment from a big company. I think it was Altria. I think they put in, like, again, I don't know if it was 16 or 30 billion. Like, it was quite a bit of money. They're still around it because the PMTA, that was where the FDA denied it. So they were expecting their marketing order, but once it reached that stage, then it's like you have to realign your strategy, submit another PMTA to be able to sell in the US. So I don't know all the details, but I'm sure they're have some court battles and going back and forth. But it does make it challenging.
So what do you say to the people that go, because if we just take the example of Juul, and I remember watching some of the stuff in Congress or whatever you call it, and they're kind of just hammering the executives that worked at Juul. This is years ago. And because Juul was marketed as a stop smoking aid. And you're absolutely right. A lot of kids who had never smoked before were smoking Juul, which is a nicotine product. And it's, not good for you. And like what you mentioned earlier, if you're not addicted to nicotine, you're not suggesting to, get onto the product and start using nicotine like a Sesh product or any other nicotine product. But what do you say to the people? Because there are for sure going to be people that are going to say this that don't believe you and go, you know what, you're full of shit.
Yeah.
I know that you're just trying to basically get as many people as possible to start using this nicotine product. And I think it's going to actually it's not going to be a net benefit to people who are trying to quit smoking. You're actually going to get more people addicted to nicotine than what we had before. So, and there are for sure going to be skeptics who are going to say that. What do you say to those people?
Yeah, I think like from that set, like right from the start, we're making sure we're responsible. And in the US, we're not making cessation claims. So we're not telling people, the nicotine pouch is going to help you quit smoking, just because that's not how they identified it in their regulations. So it's going to take time before we could get there. So I think it's also being very careful on your marketing claims, to avoid any of that from happening. So there's going to be skeptics, but honestly, there's already been studies done in Sweden showing the net benefit to the population. And with our product within that PMTA, we have to do the same thing. So it's quite a bit of work.
But I'm gonna push back on you there, just because
Yeah.
it's like,
I get that all
I'll
the
play
time.
devil's advocate, because it's like these studies. What people say, studies. Number one, like, who is conducting these studies? Is it the nicotine companies conducting the studies? Because everyone knows that's like a kid grading his own paper. Everyone's going to get an A. Like, who are running these studies? Are these studies regulated by the FDA, for example, by Health Canada? Like, how does that work? Like, for example, again, I'm not an expert on this, but to bring a drug to market, like in the pharmaceutical companies, very, very, very expensive. It takes a long time. They're very careful about the types of drugs that they bring to market.
Yeah.
So what's going on in your industry right now?
So honestly, it varies a ton on what studies you're conducting, but for it to hold weight, like it's not something that we're doing in our basement. For Health Canada, they have, and that's why we hired a guy that used to work there. There's clear steps. So you have to develop your protocols. It has to go through an ethics board to get approved. Then you have to go to a CRO that doesn't have any relationship with you, to really be able to disconnect from it and make it credible. So for them to accept anything, like it has to go through the steps and be a credible study. I was referring to studies that were also already done and published in other countries.
Make sure there's no conflict of interest.
Yeah.
Just like Justin Trudeau and Johnston, the special rapporteur. You follow any of that that's going on?
I've been dabbling, but
oh my god, it's just politics. They're so full of shit, all these guys. Anyways,
and then
we won't get into that.
The other one that's important one is where the FDA holds a lot of weight to, is the switching study. So obviously they want to bring people down that harm reduction scale. So if you're a smoker, like how many people are then switching into your product, versus how many people are never used it or they're in it. So it's something that there's a pretty big piece of the PMTA that they watch pretty closely.
And there is, I can't say this because like I used to smoke. I still smoke like now and again. I go through stages. Like sometimes I'll smoke quite a bit for like 2 weeks and then I won't smoke a cigarette for like a month. It's kind of weird. And but I remember when I was younger, so I quit smoking when I was buying a pack, like almost a pack a day. I was smoking a lot as a student. And then when I quit and I went on the patch, and it definitely helped because the patch, when you put it on, you feel like shit. So it's basically a rush of just nicotine going into your body, and I would feel like absolute shit because it's just nicotine going in. You get lightheaded, you get a buzz. Sometimes I would even feel sick, and it made me not want to have a cigarette. So it definitely worked on in certain instances and stuff like that. And does your product, does it do the same thing? So let's say, do you have a 2 milligram and a 4 milligram?
Yeah, so we launched with the 4, and then we brought out the 2 just last couple months, to offer a step down as well.
Got it.
For consumers.
And so the 4 I would assume it'd probably be the same thing. Like if you're, for example, if you're not a smoker, which again, you're not recommending to start doing it, but if you're someone who's not used to nicotine, if you take a 4 milligram gum, you're probably gonna feel like shit.
Oh yeah. Like you'll definitely get lightheaded. If you don't use it properly and just chew it, then people might feel a little nauseous. That's why it's so important to use it properly. And similar to like if you never smoked before, right, and your first cigarette, it's probably disgusting, and it should be. You don't want people to power through that.
How are you supposed to chew the gum? Can you tell us this?
So
basically, so like if you get a gum, so here, let's get this on camera. I'm going to take the product. Okay. So I just walked into the store. I got myself some Sesh 4 milligram nicotine gum. I pop it open and I pop it in my mouth. How am I supposed to chew this gum? Because it's not like a piece of Hubba Bubba. It's not like a Trident. It's not nothing to do with that.
No, exactly.
How do I chew it?
So you actually just chew it like 5 to 10 times lightly, and then you put it just in between the upper lip, and that's where the nicotine gets absorbed. If you need more nicotine, like you could repeat that process. It lasts for up to 30 minutes, but basically
So after 30 minutes, I should be throwing out the gum.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that.
And you could do it about 2 to 3 times, but you could repeat it to kind of activate the nicotine.
And what's that thing? Because I've been guilty of this. Some days where I'll chew gum more than others, and my throat will hurt.
Yeah.
And I thought I was getting sick. This was actually like 3 weeks ago. Thought I was getting sick. My throat was killing me. But if you are getting sick, your throat will be sore, but you'll feel it in your body. You'll have shiver. Yeah, you're getting sick. You're getting a cold. I didn't have any of those symptoms. So I'm like, what the hell is this? Like, I don't think I'm getting sick, but my throat really hurts. And I went online to look up Nicorette gum and throat, and there was definitely a forum saying, hey, you're chewing too much gum.
Yeah.
But why did my throat start to get sore?
So again, it's like through the nicotine, like with the gum and the pouch, it doesn't have that as much, but when it releases, it kind of drips down, and that's what irritates it.
Is it dangerous?
In terms of nicotine or in terms of?
No, like for example, so if I'm chewing tobacco, you're supposed to spit it out, but people that chew tobacco for a long time, let's say, for example, they have throat disease or throat cancer, excuse me. Sometimes people, they'll have to their mouth disease or mouth cancer, whatever it is. Like, it's really not good for you.
Yeah.
Like, you're not going to get lung disease, but there's a lot of other stuff and cancers that you're going to get. Does nicotine cause cancer? I think I answered my own question because you mentioned at the beginning, but like, is it dangerous? Like, if my throat's sore, it's basically my body saying, hey, like, stop this. You shouldn't be doing this. Like, what is it dangerous for my throat, or is it?
So like I said earlier, like, nicotine is not really what's known to cause cancer or problems with your lungs. If you're using a ton of it and you're ingesting it, it could make you feel nauseous. You're not going to get the satisfaction from the nicotine either that way.
Yeah.
So I really think it comes back to like how you use the product.
Got it. So you're supposed to use it 30 minutes max. What's the let's say I'm smoking 10 cigarettes a day. So if I'm getting the 4 milligram, how many? Because I think one cigarette's 1 milligram of nicotine, I think, right? Roughly?
It depends a bit on the smoker, right?
Okay.
Like, because you're inhaling and you're taking puffs. So if you're just like the whole thing, you'll get quite a bit of nicotine, but it will depend on how you use the product.
I have a buddy like that who smokes, and whenever it's so funny and it's hilarious, but like annoying at the same time. And if he smokes, he goes like this.
Yeah.
And like, but he makes that sound. You're like, holy shit, you're gonna suck that thing, man. Jesus, relax.
And that's what I do like about the pouch, because with the pouch, you don't have that kind of instinct to constantly chew it, like you do with a gum. And I do think a lot more people are going to use it correctly, just because you could chew it. Our pouch, you could chew it lightly. You do the same thing, and then you're not every 2 seconds. You don't think, oh, I have a piece of gum in my mouth, I got to be chewing this constantly. So I do think it's going to help kind of that learning curve for people.
I think if you guys brought the pouches to market, because I know a bunch of people that order the nicotine pouches, but everyone orders from Zyn. So, again, we have no association with Zyn, but that's the brand, the ZYN. That's the popular brand that everyone thinks of. And I have a bunch of buddies, they'll order it online to bring it to Canada. Now, I know you're not doing that because that's against the regulatory body and stuff like that. So that's not what I'm asking you. But if you guys do end up, and sounds like you're going to, but like when you guys bring the nicotine pouch onto the market, I feel like if you were to brand it as on top of what it is and the benefits of using it, if you were to brand Sesh itself as a Canadian company, I think a lot of people would buy it in the stores. I think a lot would. Yeah,
absolutely. I think there's the notion that it's kind of formulated in Sweden, made in Canada, Canadian-owned company. I think it does add a lot of value for us here.
Yeah. Like that must be what's the time frame? And I know it's more of a guess. What's the time frame before you think that you will be able to bring the pouches to the Canadian market? I know it's a hypothetical question.
For me, it's so hard to put a date. In the past, we were kind of put in a date with our retailers. Well, they have a 270-day review process. So it's not, and that's once you have your application in. There's a lot of work to get the application in. So when we had those timelines, that's kind of what we were communicating. but there could be always requests for more information. So there is, it's hard to say an exact date. I'm very hopeful by 2024. It would be the absolute latest, but again, it's hard to know.
I'll be a customer in 2024.
Okay.
If it's funny because I didn't know that you couldn't sell the pouches. I was already telling everyone like, yeah, Sesh, you get it at Jean Couture. I didn't know it's just the gum.
Yeah.
Because people, I don't know, like even for myself, I like the pouches better than the gum. It's just like I don't know. I don't know why I feel it's more of a buzz. I feel like it's
honestly, that's not a bad thing, right? Like
yeah.
that's why you're bringing in these new products, because some people might have tried the gum and it wasn't for them, but the pouch will be.
Yeah.
Some people might have tried the pouch, it wasn't for them. Maybe they prefer the gum.
Yeah.
So I think having these alternatives in place, it just really depends on consumer preference.
Are you going to make a spray as well?
So we don't want to stretch too far. We definitely looked at a spray. We looked at some other products.
I hated the spray, by the way.
Yeah,
It gave me the hiccups.
Called the Nicups.
Is it really? Yeah, I'll get that. I'll do it in of it.
Yeah. But yeah, I think the spray is it's one of the newer ones in market that people are using. But honestly, it's we're a small company still.
Yeah.
I think we need to kind of target our investments strategically.
What's your if you're comfortable sharing this? What's your annual revenue right now?
So we're, like I said, we're very, very new. Or the first commercial shipment was, I think, in like April, May of last year. And there's a long process to get the vendor applications and everything going with these major accounts. So really, it wasn't until we did have some outlets right away, but it wasn't until December where people start the quit season, their New Year's resolutions, that we started to get a lot of traction. And between the U.S. and Canada, we've done over $1 million since.
In less than a year.
Yeah,
that's great. Yeah. And like, are these products typically, are they high margin? Like one of these things. Like, how much do you sell this pack here? So there's how many? 8 in there.
In terms of this carton, there's 10 packs.
There's 10 packs, and you would sell this for how much?
So that's where we retail each pack individually. It retails at $8.99.
$8.99 each pack. Okay, $9.
And we have a comfortable margin that's not crazy for retailers.
Yeah.
Just to be competitive, I would say.
Yeah.
And
are you less expensive than Nicorette?
So Nicorette doesn't sell in a single pack.
Got it.
So they sell in bulk.
Okay.
So definitely, the margins aren't as crazy as you would expect. Just because like the packaging is quite a big cost in it.
Yeah.
Nicotine is expensive. So there's definitely a lot of cost associated with developing the product. And then right now we're reinvesting into the accounts. So you could buy a single pack at $8.99, but if you buy 2, a lot of our retailers give you $1.50 saving. So that kind of, we eat that. It's something that's, we want to give this a shot and make it work, but it's not something that won't succeed without the marketing dollars behind it.
Where does nicotine come from?
So there's
like I was just thinking about that. I'm like, is it like a made in a lab or something, or is it found in nature? Where is nicotine?
It depends. So like there's tobacco derived nicotine,
okay,
which many people use, and then there's also synthetic nicotine. That's another source.
So if I was to eat a tobacco leaf, there's natural nicotine in the leaf?
In tobacco, yes, there's nicotine.
In a plant?
Yeah.
So I could get addicted to the plant if I just start eating the plant.
I don't know the delivery of it,
Okay.
so I don't want to necessarily get into all the in and outs, because I'm not a kind of like a professional on eating tobacco leaves.
Okay.
But yeah, nicotine is derived from tobacco in one form. So that's one way to get nicotine.
And what does it look like? Like when you have it in the factory, is it just like a big pouch? Is it powder? Is it a liquid? Is it like what does it look like? I know you don't want to give away your secrets and stuff, but it's just like, and it's patented. But like I don't even know. I have no idea what nicotine looks like.
Yeah. So we get it in barrels. So we get it in a liquid form.
Okay.
And then it has a process to make it into a powder.
Liquid form. Interesting. And what if you were to like not smoke it and like shoot it like in your veins. Would that be really bad? Like, let's say I really want to quit cigarettes and I'm just like, nothing's working and I can't smoke and I just take it and I'm like, oh, like, would that work or would it kill me?
Well, like I said, like the nicotine is in this case absorbed through the upper lip. So if you're ingesting it, you're not going to get the satisfaction from the nicotine. So it really depends on the dosage form and how your intake is.
Got it. What's the how are you coping right now with the competition in the industry?
So it varies again, Canada, US.
Yeah.
I think in
sorry, let me be more specific. Like before, I want to preface that question with this. How many competitors are in this space? How many companies? 10, 20, 100?
So in the US, like, to be honest, like with the PMTA, it's a huge hurdle that not a ton of companies would necessarily go through or could overcome. So we definitely took on a big challenge with that. If again, it's hard to know who submitted the PMTA because it's not necessarily public knowledge. Yeah. But I think a lot of people that did, they're on the market and we know who they are. So I would say 12 to 15 major competitors
in the US.
In the US.
Okay. And a little less in Canada.
And less so in Canada. Okay. But supported by major companies, right? Mm-hmm. So they're massive companies that
have cash behind them.
They're behind these products. I think in terms of competition, like I was saying, I think healthy competition is always good. I think it allows people to rethink their strategy. It pushes them to do new things, and it grows a category that, you know, people might have been using some other nicotine gums over the years and want to try something new because it didn't work for them. Other people, they might have tried the nicotine gums on the market and don't use anything right now, and it's great, it worked. So I do think competition is good, and I also think it's good for retailers. I think being able to have only one brand that owns 100% of the market, it doesn't allow them to kind of have a fair negotiations in their contract. Yeah. And obviously those companies still want them to hold their product, but being able to have multiple, I think it's good for everybody.
Said like a true capitalist. No, I agree, because that's what ends up happening. I mean, in Canada, I'm just trying to think off the top of my head while you were saying that. So if I go to the pharmacy and I want to get the gum, Nicorette, first brand. I think Jean Couture has their own brand or something.
Yeah, a lot have their own brand. Yeah.
Yeah. So but I think there's like 3 brands on the shelf. Nicorette being the biggest one, the most expensive. Yeah. Thrive. And then the other ones. The Nicorette I find is the best tasting gum. And then I'm trying to think of other stuff. But I don't know. I just feel like because whenever you go to the US, and again, I'll just speak from experience. So I just got back from InsurTech. So InsurTech is this conference. You go, it's technology and insurance. And I went to New York City. So I go to the trade show. And then when I'm there, man, there's so many insurance companies. There's so many different tech companies that were there to basically help support these insurance companies, to help them digitize, whether that was through claims management, working with insurance brokers and insurance agents. Like, it was really cool to see. There were so many players. Yeah. Whereas here in Canada, it's like there's a lot of people, but there's not a lot of players. So for like, even in insurance is becoming oligopolistic as well. Yeah. In Canada, in particular in Quebec. Like, if you were to look at the home and car insurance market in Quebec, if you take Desjardins, Beneva, and Intact, I think those 3 companies all together, they own about 80 or 85% of the home and car insurance market. So massive. Like, where I'm going with this is just in Canada, I know you're trying to penetrate it, but like, do you see down the line, once this gets approved and once these products start being sold, whether it's retail, like in the pharmacies or wherever else, do you see this kind of like conglomerating as well in the future? Do you think there's going to be a lot of acquisitions, like M&As and stuff like that? Do you like where do you see this going? Because it's like I'm not explaining this very clearly. No, it's because like in the US, there's a bunch of competitors, and it usually stays like that. It's fragmented. In Canada, it's rarely like that. It very quickly becomes consolidated. And like, do you kind of see that happening here? And I guess the reason why I'm asking that is like, I'm still trying to figure out, your end goal? And it's probably too early to ask that question. You're like, well, Curtis, I don't really know, man, because it's like we're just starting out. Like maybe we'll get acquired, maybe we won't, maybe we'll go out of business. I have no idea, but like this is what we're trying to do, and this is how we're gonna get there. But like what?
Well, I definitely think there's going to be some consolidation. I think the difference is it might not necessarily be only by the companies you think. I think, if you're launching if someone was selling a vape brand, there might be a lot of tobacco companies interested. In your situation with insurance, it's insurance. But with these products, there could be like pharma, there could be very different industries that just start to kind of play into it a bit more. In the US, I do think there's a lot of competition. There's a lot more people. So
yes, it's 10x the population.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you take your same example, multiply by 10, it's a lot of other products. In the US, I think consolidation is definitely probably going to happen quicker in this instance. And that's mainly driven by the barrier of entry into the category because of the PMTA. So I think like if you have a marketing order that's granted, like the valuation is significantly higher for the company and takes a lot of risk off of other people that, were interested that didn't necessarily want to get into it. And then on the US side, I think sometimes they have their hands full taking care of the US market.
Yeah.
That they might want to go into Canada, but it's a whole other regulatory process to go through. So I do see certain companies kind of using it as a way to expand into other markets. And that doesn't need to be the US into Canada or Canada and the US, but it could be, if someone has a great pouch product in Europe that, has considerable market share, what's their next stage to increase out? Definitely, I could see it being an opportunity for acquisitions for companies outside that are kind of looking in.
How much equity did you guys have to give out? If you're comfortable saying it, you don't have to.
Yeah, basically, like the goal was always not to be self-sufficient as much as we can without over diluting the company. I think that was key. Obviously, there has been dilution over the years, but
unless you're a guy with a couple $1 million in your bank account, that's just inevitable. It's what's going to happen.
It's part of it, and it was kind of like planned when we needed to. The majority still remains, like Max is still a majority owner, right? So I think it's still we wanted to maintain control and not just give up the company. At the same time, if you're raising money, the idea is also if your company is worth $1 million and you raise money and you grow to $20 million, all of a sudden your equity is also worth a lot more.
Yeah.
But you definitely got to be careful that you're not giving up too much too early and growing at the right rate.
And you're getting the money from where? Is it private investors? Is it private equity? Is it individuals? Is it like where are you getting the money? Without naming names, like where are you getting the money from?
So the initial rounds was mostly like retail investors. So like mostly like
friends, family.
Exactly. And some strategic ones that, they've done very well for themselves and they saw the opportunity in Sesh, but are also bringing a lot to the table in terms of like connections or business experience. I think we're at a stage now that it passed that threshold that VCs are becoming more interested. I think with VCs, they do want to get in early.
Yeah.
But it's not just on a dream. There has to be really like the financials behind it and a bit of a track record.
Have you spoken to some VCs?
We have, yeah.
American or Canadian?
A bit of both. I think for us, since our initial investors were mainly out of Canada, we definitely tried to allocate more into the US market, just because obviously the opportunity there and to have those synergies between what they are potentially doing and what they invested in.
And what would you say is the big difference between an American venture capital firm and a Canadian venture capital firm? Or do they behave more or less the same?
So
like if I was to, on the surface, I've never dealt with the VC. If I was to look at it, my guess would be that a Canadian VC firm would most likely be more conservative because they're probably not as big as an American venture capitalist firm. That would be my guess. I don't know if that's right or not.
Yeah, I think they vary so much, right? And we've talked to a lot of VCs that, they've invested into Canadian companies, even though they're in the US or vice versa. And I don't think it's like a one size kind of fits all. But if you're talking to someone that lives and resides in California, that's where their VC is set up. Yes, they could have investments into companies elsewhere, but usually that's where they're really growing their network.
Yeah.
So I think that's where it kind of helps with distribution in the US.
Do you think you would have been able to get your product, the gum, to market, and what you're trying to get, the pouches, to market as well? Do you think you'd be able to do this without having outside money help you with the company?
Unless, like
In
you said,
terms
you
of the
have,
cost, like, because
yeah,
it's a lot of time, and you know, you have to pay the consultants, you have to, like, for example, you're speaking with a gentleman or a woman, I'm not sure,
yeah,
who works at Health Canada to help you get these products to market.
yeah.
Would you say, you know, if you didn't get the money from the other investors, would you guys be able to afford it?
No, like
Yeah, short answer, no.
in terms
Yeah.
like you said,
Which
like
is why you
don't
gotta
have,
dilute the equity, right?
yeah,
So it's like,
you don't
yeah.
have $2 million in your pocket.
Is that
and
the cost?
No, it was just the example that you threw
Okay.
out before.
Yeah.
And so there's definitely a lot of expenses, and like before even having a product, you know, there's a lot of cost, which is a little bit harder to kind of swallow for a lot of people. I think, you know, you could start small, launch a product to market on D2C, limit your investment, and then kind of grow it out. For us, there's a ton of R&D, there's a ton of regulatory before you even have a chance to have your product on the shelf in Canada. So I think it would be very difficult. For me, it would be impossible. But I think it'd be very difficult unless you're pretty cashed up.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, and it's also interesting because the people, I don't know, it's a new product, so it's not like you can't go, again, I'll just speak from experience. If I wanted to go get the people that help finance us, they work in the industry, they know the industry very, very, very well, and they give us a lot of guidance, and they just know, it's like, okay, Curtis, these are the numbers you need to look at, these are the margins, there's this, there's that, this is what they give, a lot of guidance, kind of like where I need to go. And in compared to at the beginning of when I started my career, when I thought money grew on trees, and I just said, oh, growth, it's amazing. Well, it's like, yeah, there's a lot of other things to learn. There's specific industry standard margins you should be hitting. And it was actually interesting when I went to go, I met with a bank. I had lunch with two gentlemen, very nice guys. And I didn't even know this. This is like 3 months ago. And they're like, if you don't operate at this EBITDA margin, like, people won't take you, if you're trying to get money to acquire another business or for organic growth, if you're not running at that margin, people will will question you as an operator and will most likely not give you the money. So like industry standards for insurance, it's about 30% EBITDA margins as an insurance broker. And so if I was there running at like 5 or 10, they'd be like, no, you don't know what you're doing. We're going to go direct our capital elsewhere and stuff like that. But do you know what those EBITDA margins are in your industry?
So I think what's a bit different in our industry is the shift, right? Like, I think, like, if people have been using tobacco products for years, they knew the harm, they kind of shifted off. But now there's like a lot more, I would say, pressure in society that is not as accepted as it used to be. So these people need to go somewhere. So like the category as a whole is just seeing such explosive growth that I think that's what's also very interesting to investors is it's not every day. It's like when cannabis became legalized in Canada, right?
Yeah.
Like people called it, what was it? The green,
I have no idea.
Instead of the gold rush, the green rush.
Yeah.
Obviously it changed over time with what exactly happened in that industry. But I think it's similar.
All the penny stocks and stuff.
Yeah, it's similar in the fact that they know it's a rapidly growing industry that is kind of like helping people curb that addiction. And then for me, it doesn't need to stop here, right? Like I think there's a lot of learnings that we could take and apply it to other sectors or any other industries outside of nicotine. They could be super interested in going through the same thing.
What differentiates Sesh from the other guys? Like, why should I buy Sesh over Nicorette? Or if I'm in the US, why should I buy a pouch of Sesh as opposed to Zyn?
Yeah, so I think from our standpoint, like there's a lot of product features that we think is a good selling proposition. So like the fact that you could pick up a single pack of gum, I think is a big benefit. That barrier to entry and like that out-of-pocket expense, Like when we talked to pharmacists, they were very supportive of that. There's been a lot of work on the taste. So definitely having a gum that also tastes great and, it's not breaking up in your mouth. I think it's really important. And then I think a brand that people could kind of resonate with. So I did tell the story about like how the name was started, but I think for us, we really want to have like a non-judgmental environment that's opening.
Whenever I see Sesh, I just think of that's what I think about when I see it.
Yeah. So there's definitely a product, but also the brand and the community aspect that we're trying to grow that I think will allow people to really resonate with the brand and be kind of proud of that journey versus trying to hide it.
Who would you say is the pioneer within Sesh that's building the brand, or is it kind of taking a form of its own? Is it doing it by itself? Because it's important. It's like one thing that I find that a lot of companies, they let their brand identity come to them as opposed to saying, no. This is my why. This is why the company exists, and bring it to market. Does that make sense? Kind of what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
And I feel like a lot of people they let other people dictate what their brand is as opposed to the opposite.
Yeah. So we were, before even having the brand or the product on the market, there was a lot of work done on the brand side. Obviously, we have a great creative director, but that doesn't necessarily give the brand its values. So we partnered with a company out in Vancouver, and it's a pretty big agency that really developed like a full brand guidelines or manifesto to make sure like everything from the tone to what we believe in is really set.
And what do you believe in?
So I
Why is this funny?
No, it's just because I feel like I'm going to go through the full brand manifesto.
Yeah.
But I think that non-judgmental journey is so important.
Okay.
I think from a lot of companies, they're like, cigarettes are bad. Don't smoke. Well, people know that now, but they're still doing it. So why are they doing it? It's either because they like a certain aspect around it, like that. It could be that social aspect. And it also could be because they've tried before and they couldn't achieve it, but everybody's constantly giving them pressure that they just gave up. But if you have more of a non-judgmental approach and you're taking them along that journey, understanding that everybody's a bit different, I think then they open up a bit more towards like that experience. I think that's one thing.
And the experience of quitting?
Exactly.
Okay.
So that's one thing that I do notice is like, not everybody, they get a lot of pressures from society. Like I'm sure a lot of people tell their dad, stop smoking, why you keep smoking.
Yeah.
It's like, I tried. Like, but I think if you have more of a community that's encouraging and helping each other, then the likelihood of success will be higher.
It's like a community of alcoholics, like Alcoholics Anonymous. They're all trying to quit drinking.
Yeah.
Or they have quit drinking and are basically supporting other people that have quit, that are trying to quit, and tips and stuff like that. And so if someone starts this, like I know everyone's different, but so they'll buy the product for, okay, I'm trying to quit smoking. I go buy Sesh. What's like a time frame for me to stop using nicotine products altogether? I know everyone's different. It's probably a difficult question to answer.
Again,
I quit like years ago and I'm still on the products. So it's like,
well, it depends, I think, on what you're trying to achieve. And I do go back to like a product is really half the battle. I think it allows you to kind of like control your craving and be able to focus, right? Because you're not like scrambling and looking for your cigarette, and then have your behavior change too, which therapy component I think is important, because they could give you tips on what to expect, how to kind of like deal with certain situations where it might be high stress. So I do think when you link both together, it's crucial. But to say it's going to be a month, 2 months, 6 months, it's hard to give it an exact timeline because people are different. But there's definitely a gradual decrease over time that I think if people follow, then it'll work, hopefully.
Do you want any to insert any finishing words there? I think this. Well, how long is the podcast today, Joe? I'm gonna guess. Let me guess. 1 hour 10 minutes.
1 hour 40.
140.
140.
Oh fuck. Okay.
Well, we talking about like the bathroom.
Holy shit! I didn't know that. Okay, yeah. Let's wrap this up. I thought this was like an hour. Oh damn. 140. All right, let's wrap this up. Fuck, that's way too long.
Yeah.
Okay.
No one's gonna want to hear me for an
Yeah,
hour, 40 minutes.
yeah. Holy shit. Anything else you want to finish with, Joey? Not Joey. Fuck, Mikey.
Honestly, well, thanks for having me on.
I had fun today.
Yeah,
I didn't think that was an hour and a half.
Yeah,
Jesus.
an hour 40. I don't
Yeah.
think I've talked that long all week.
Yeah.
But no, I think honestly, it's for the product. Like I would say, like open the discussion. I think even the people that are skeptical, like I take all feedback very seriously, positive and negative. We open that discussion to have around the product. And for those that, are a smoker and it's tried or hasn't tried before, like it's definitely an alternative that I think is worth a shot. And for those that aren't a smoker, they probably have a loved one or know someone that is. I would say if it's our product or another product, kind of encourage them through that journey and don't criticize them because it's not hard to, it's not easy to quit.
Mikey Scarffe, well said. Thank you for coming on the Freemium podcast. I'm Curtis Killen, your host. Mikey Scarffe, Sesh Products. They have the nicotine gum in Canada, and the pouches are coming soon to Canada. Thank you so much, sir. And if you guys like this, smash the like button and follow us. Thank you so much.